Out of Washington this week, President Trump returns to the Capitol after high-level talks and a warning from China's president. This comes as the war with Iran drags on overseas. For the latest on this and more, let's bring in our Washington correspondent, Reggie Cecchini. So, Reggie, let's start with the high-stakes summit between Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. What have been the biggest takeaways from those talks?
Well, Miranda, we know that the president and the Chinese president held talks on a number of important issues, including the threat that AI poses, along with what both countries intend to do to embrace AI while pushing back on that threat. We know that there were conversations that the two leaders held in terms of going forward and dealing with the Iran war, although it is unclear if the president was able to persuade China to step in and do more than it's been doing now in terms of observing, especially since there's been some reporting in the last several weeks that suggests that China may have been actually providing Iran with some information on where to target American bases. It's not clear what China may ultimately do here to help Donald Trump out. There were also conversations on the issue of the economy. We know that nerves were rattled when Donald Trump had levied all of those tariffs on China last year. Some of that has been walked back. We know that there's been some potential commitments here for China to buy American agriculture goods along with Boeing airplanes, although there's been nothing formal that came out of China. There was also a discussion about Taiwan, according to Donald Trump, and this has rattled the nerves of national security experts who say this is policy that is typically not discussed between the two leaders because it's up to Taiwan to decide how it would want to move forward. So there's a lot of conversations that happened. The question here is going to be, are there going to be any big deliverables for Donald Trump to bring back from this trip to China, given the fact that he is in a weaker position than he was during his first term?
All right, Reggie. So the remarks about Taiwan have received a lot of attention. But of course, this summit in China, it comes at a time where, as we've mentioned, the Iran war continues with no end in sight. Where do things stand in that conflict right now?
Well, I mean, look, the Strait of Hormuz is still closed, and it is still choking off a vast majority of the world's energy supply, except for, in the words of the Iranian government, vessels that are friendly to Iran. We do know that a flagship with Chinese purchased oil was able to navigate through without issue, but we also know that the American blockade does remain in place. So that is something that was clearly not resolved between China and the United States, and it is not clear where things go from here. We also know in terms of nuclear, Donald Trump has said, look, a 20-year suspension of Iran's nuclear program is something he could get behind, while also saying that the nuclear material on the ground in Iran is more of a, quote, public relations problem. It's not quite clear what the president means by that, or if it means that he doesn't really care about it or is in some kind of conversation maybe to try and deal with it. So we know the war is ongoing. We know Donald Trump has threatened that the military strikes could begin again if he doesn't like what he sees coming out of Iran. And it means that this kind of 4 to 6 week war, now well into its 10th week, does appear to continue forward.
Now, domestically, Reggie, both Republicans and Democrats are actively trying to reshape congressional maps to maximize the number of seats they have. Take us through how all of this started and where it stands right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, this was going to be a year where most of the political analysts said Democrats were going to be able to make some big gains, possibly retake back the House. And then we saw the U.S. Supreme Court overturn some of the voting rights with the Voting Right Act, which makes it easier for Republican-led states to gerrymander what were historically black or minority districts and potentially swing them back towards the Republicans. We know that in Virginia, that state's Supreme Court overruled maps that were actually voted on by the members of Virginia. So what we see here is this race by Republican-led states to redraw the districts and claw back some of those gains that Democrats were expected to make by making the states more favorable to Republicans. Now, Democrats are trying to push back. They do have the courts that are standing in their way. There's also the timing and the fact that we are quickly approaching midterms here, and it's not clear if they will be able to make any kind of big gains here. This is coming under significant criticism, but even in some deep Republican states like Mississippi, that state's governor says they're not going to use the new maps that were actually put forward by that state's legislators, saying that because primary season is already underway, they can't do it. So this is really kind of throwing a wrench into Democrats' plans, and it is a question here as to whether Republicans will get the wish that they wanted from Donald Trump, which was to simply do what they could to keep control.
All right, so redrawing the maps, Reggie, is just one of many things that Trump has tried to change since taking office. He's also announced plans for renovations on a number of places in Washington, including the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool, but he's now trying to distance himself from that. So what's happening there?
Well, I mean, look, this was a contract given out with no bid. Donald Trump said he knew the contractor because he'd worked on pools at some of his resorts in the past. Over the last couple of weeks, it's been a little bit chaotic. The paint going down has been reportedly bubbling and cracking. It is in various different shades. Congress is starting to push back on it. Donald Trump is now, too, saying that he doesn't know the contractor. He didn't know anything about the bid. He's trying to blame this on the Interior Department. And the cost of it, $1 million-ish, is now up around $13 million. So in this push to kind of beautify Washington, D.C. on the approach to the America 250 birthday celebration, there are big questions about not only the process, but the cost, and this is something around the district that we've seen. Just last night, I saw several of the circles around the city blocked off still, but no work actually happening. Again, raising questions about the process that was put in place by Donald Trump, and when there's criticism now, we're seeing Donald Trump try to blame it on someone else.
All right, that is our Washington correspondent, Reggie Cecchini. Thank you, Reggie.